Hi, I'm Jason Malott. I'm author of Adam is God, Eve is Us, Strange Stories about Aliens, Angels, and the Love of God from the Book of Genesis. This video is going to be a little bit different. I've been doing videos talking about my book and the chapters in my book, but I do also want to talk about something a little bit different. This is going to be a lot longer video because I do want to go into some ideas here. In my last book, I did have a chapter in it called The Idolatry of Christianity that is a little, it's filled with some landmines. It might cause some people to raise some eyebrows and even throw around the word heretic, which I'm okay with that, because I wrote this book to make you think. I wanted people to read it and think about it, and whether they agree or disagree with me, at least they're thinking about it. This chapter, I go into some concepts that basically oppose some beliefs that some people believe are traditional Christian beliefs that people have believed for all time, and finding out that that is not true. And it's the doctrine of hell. Now, what I want to start out by saying first is that I would never say I don't believe in hell, because I see it every day. People are making hell constantly for other people. And I look at the scripture where Jesus said, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth be loosed in heaven. I see that as we have the power to either create heaven or hell for people. And in a lot of ways, we create hells that eventually we're going to end up in, whether it's in this life or maybe in the life to come. But is that eternal? Is that something that's going to last forever and ever? If you believe that, number one, you would be in a grave disagreement with the person who started the Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther. I don't know if you knew this, so I can read this to you real quick. He wrote a letter to a guy named Hasu von Reichenberg, and I am totally messing that name up, and it was in 1522. He said, "God forbid that I should limit the time for acquiring faith to the present life." He's saying death is not the end. And that is what I'm trying to tell you. Death is not the end. To believe that death is the end is actually not something taught in the Bible. We could start with one of my favorite is a psalm that Jonah quotes while he's in the belly of the well. And he says, "From hell I cried out to you." It's interesting because I see in a lot of places, like the rich man and Lazarus, that hell is something that is a little more open than what people think it is. It's something that I don't believe it's meant to just torture you forever. I think it's probably meant for change. I don't know. That's between the person and God. And how that happens, and how that God is outside of time, outside of everything. He can do what he needs to do however he needs to do it. But in the end, and this is what I want you to understand, in the end, God is not the biggest failure. God will find a way to save everyone. Now, if you have a problem with that, you take that up with God. Because when I read in the Bible, like for instance, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, that death has no more sting. The sting of death has been defanged. The fangs have been taken out of death. And Paul himself doesn't really even mention hell much. Actually, if you want to get down to it, in the New Testament, there's almost 8,000 verses, depending on your version of the Bible. And out of those 8,000 verses, there are 22 verses that are interpreted using the word hell. My problem with it is 12 of those 22 scriptures was Jesus referring to the Valley of Hinnom, or Gehenna, where they used to burn their children to false gods, and it said the fires were constantly going where the Israelites would go and burn their children, and it became a horrible place because of what was done there. So they defiled it. They turned it into a dump, and it's where all the wild animals live, where they were gnashing on bones, so they're gnashing of teeth, and all the lepers and the people who are considered unclean would live out in this dump where basically they would be weeping, and the fires of this dump were constantly going to burn the trash because the fire is never quenched and the maggot is never, all these things that you hear. Those 12 verses, that's what Jesus was talking about. But the other 10, they're talking about a few different things, and I just want to give you perspective. Let's say all of those verses were referring to something called hell. That is less than 1% of the entire New Testament. Think about that. If your preaching and your belief is in something that's mentioned less than 1% of the Bible, and if that's what you're considering the most important thing to talk about, I grew up in a lot of ways, like when I say grew up, I became a Christian when I was 19, but I was around church, and as becoming a Christian, I was involved in churches, and I heard it all day long. It's basically the concept that if you don't choose to make a decision based upon whatever tribe or flavor of Christianity you're under, then there's this horrible place waiting for you to torment you forever and ever. I got to ask you, do you really believe that God is going to be tormenting people? I mean, I want you to think about this. If you believe that God is physically, for all eternity, turning up the heat in some basement somewhere where he's burning and hurting and torturing people, all because they didn't love him? Think about that. That sounds like a jealous boyfriend. That sounds like a horrible person. You look at him like this evil father. He calls us sons, but then he commits child abuse. I don't understand that. I don't understand that concept. Now, if you believe that hell is eternal, then you've got to believe that God is the one eternally doing it. I mean, you think that he's going to let a devil do it or a demon? Like, oh, here, I'm going to give you a... No, because they're destroyed in the lake of fire. So do you really think that God is going to be doing this torturing for all eternity? That's what you got to ask yourself. And if that's yes, then I want you to think about the God that you're serving, because this God demands that you love him or he will torture you. I don't believe that. I believe that I love God because God loved me. It was the grace of God that brought me to repentance. I decided to follow Jesus, and I decided to follow him in a way that I love other people, that I take care of other people, that I'm looking for ways that I can bless the world. I'm that way, not because I think there's a hell waiting for me. That's a disgusting way to think. That's like thinking that your kids, they might hug you and kiss you in the morning and tell you they love you, but really they're afraid of you because they know that you're going to bring them down to the basement and beat them with something. I mean, come on. Do we believe that? Would we believe that about our own children? And you don't have to. Now, I just mentioned Martin Luther, but I mean, there is a ton more. I can go into, I'm just going to give you some names of church fathers, like Origen, like Gregory of Nyssa, which I can't pronounce that properly. Another one named Bartesian, Evagrius. I mean, these are all very important church fathers. I can't always pronounce their names, but these are people who believe that God bestowed mercy upon everyone, and that all humans will be saved and reach the knowledge of the truth. And the word that's used by Peter is apokatheistemi. I cannot say that one either. But what it means is the restoration of all things. The restoration of all things. That includes humans. That's all things. Now, so I believe that God wins. I believe that in the end, he finds a way. He is the lover that never stops pursuing. Even if you deny him your entire life, even if you want nothing to do with him, he's not giving up. He doesn't just go, oh, you died, end of story. No. That's ridiculous. People who try to push that concept, you got to really think about the God that you're talking about. You got to really think about the story that you're telling, the gospel that you're preaching. Is it a gospel of love or hate? Let me give you this example. Back when I was about 17 or so, 16, 17, I was at a county fair, a local county fair, and I remember there was this tent that said, "Are you going to heaven?" You know, it's big words up there, and I'm walking by, and I'm wearing my 9 Inch Nails shirt and looking as, trashy as I looked as a teenager. And if you know who 9 Inch Nails are, you know they're very, anybody who was a Christian back then or a preacher, if they knew who they were, they grab me. And that's what happens. I'm walking by, they saw me, they pulled me and said, "Hey, do you want to find out?" And I'm like, trying to be nice. I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I sit down and I'm listening to this guy tell me, and I mean, I'm talking, he waxed eloquent in this, of all of the horrible, horrible things that are going to happen to me unless I decide to do what he wants me to do. Basically, say a prayer, whatever, go through the motions the way he feels that they should be done. But the thing was, a lot of the things he was talking about sounded more like something I saw in Hellraiser. It sounded like he was preaching to me scary movies from the 1980s. Pinhead's going to do some horrible thing to me. Freddy Krueger's going to chase me down. Jason's going to kill me in some ironic way. That's what I'm hearing when this man is telling me all these horrible things that are going to happen to me. And God's doing them all. Not Jason, not Freddy, not Pinhead, God. I don't believe in a God that is more of a villain from a horror story than a God of love.